Welcome back to part 2.
Hi, and welcome to Conductor, where we are two sisters on a mission to amplify women's voices on the podium.
Join us as we interview leaders in the field of choral music, share resources, and build a community for current and future teacher conductors, all while exploring the gender divide. I'm Kira Starr.
And I'm McKenna Stenson, and we are
Conductor. Oh, Mary, so much of what you just said, I just feel like there needs to be a moment of silence for it, because first of all, thank you for sharing your own personal story and for being vulnerable and talking about your privilege and how that has influenced you and brought you to this moment. And know that the work that you are doing is incredible and you are changing lives. And I'm sure everyone who encounters you is so lucky to know you and feels more cared for because of your existence in their life. And I think a lot of what you said is so important for our listeners to hear, because prison is supposed to be a place of rehabilitation, right? The concept is that you are eventually going to come back into the world out of this quite literal cell and re-exist with the outside world that you no longer have connection to. And I think a lot of people forget that. And a lot of people come out of prison and they can't get a job. Maybe they're not, better or worse than when they came in. Like you said, everyone's experience is different, but this concept of knowing that these are human beings is just so powerful, and people forget because they are so isolated from us. We don't interact with that population. I mean, I personally have read about Cathy's work and know of it, and it's incredible. But my own experiences in my own life, you're right, full of privilege, and I have not encountered a prison choir in person. I mean, I just haven't had these moments. So I'm so glad that you are here today to talk about this. And I was wondering if each of you might take a moment to talk about the importance of music for the well-being of incarcerated individuals. And you could give maybe examples of what you have seen, or just generally speak about the importance of music for these human beings.
Well, first I want to say that if we haven't said it already in our conversation, that prisons are direct legacies of slavery, and the quantity of people of color behind bars it's evident, and there's lots of evidence about that. And when people hear about work with music in prisons, I think the default response is, oh, it's a good thing for people who are incarcerated. But what must change is the broader public's awareness of our common humanity. Desistance is a criminological theory that it's the process of stopping criminal behavior, and there's 3 levels. First level is primary desistance, changing one's behavior. Second level is identity, broadening one's identity, not being identified as a criminal offender. And so a simple way we on the outside can do that is use people-centered words: people in prison, incarcerated individuals, etc. The third level are the social and political processes that create the space for building relationships and with people incarcerated and impacted by the system, celebrating individuals, finding welcoming spaces when people are released from prison, senses of belonging, and also making relationships with people who are currently incarcerated. So what I've discovered is that what needs to change is the general outlook of society toward that sense of our common humanity, and really learning and connecting. We are on the outside are the ones that are being hurt by putting so many human bodies behind cages, behind walls. It's like that idea of if someone doesn't practice forgiveness, it's like there's a phrase, what's that? There's a quote for it, but it's hurting yourself more than hurting the person that you're not forgiving.
Wow.
Cathy.
Mary, thank you for your vulnerability. And that's as much a teacher, I think, as anything, all of that you said. But it's really important, and it's very hard to do. And I think that making a segue into prison is that singing is vulnerable. Singing is a vulnerable act. You are the instrument. You're breathing. Your whole self is involved. It's you. And so I think nurturing that vulnerability is one thing that happens when we have a choir inside. And to I like Mary want to establish a community within the choir, whether no matter where, but especially inside a prison. And I had a kind of interesting revelation. It's a little bit of a story. On a couple of months ago, I have a couple of people in the choir who are veterans, and they asked us to sing on Veterans Day. Well, I'm a Quaker. I don't usually sing the Star Spangled Banner, although I have, and I've conducted it at the Bengals football game with 65,000 people. And I mean, so I've done it. But I don't do it as a regular thing. I don't usually sing at Veterans Day events. And so I wanted, it was an outreach to say, I love what this choir is doing. Several people in the choir said that, and I want us to perform at this event. So it was Friday. I had to be at the prison at 7 a.m. And it's over an hour drive. And so I sat there, and what the guys who were veterans were saying, how challenging it was to be in the military and then go outside, because they had this sense of camaraderie, brotherhood, everything like that. And then so many of the people who were inside who were veterans had trouble with that transition. And it's the exact same thing of being in a prison and then going out into the world. So it was just, it left me with a sense of wanting to have the men bond even more. I have a very diverse group. I mean, people in their 20s to 70s. I have lifers. I have people that are getting out soon. And where am I going with this? The importance of music. This is a totally different group. I have 27 guys. They come there every time. They bring their music every time. They bring their pencils every time. If I ask them to do something, do it. They're in it. They're in it. They want to be in it. They want to make, they know it's good for themselves in terms of with the educational aspect, because I try to teach them, even though a lot of them are oral learners. I want them to read. I want them to have, but I know that combination of readers and I do have readers, some, and non-readers is another part of the diversity that is really an important aspect of not being afraid to have people in the choir who don't learn the way the privileged people who've had an education. So I can't even tell you the significance in people's lives. And I did a women's choir in Dayton Correctional for 4 years, when we had a great warden and anything could happen. Dr. Barnwell came in twice, and we did a piece of hers that had a person who's incarcerated, a young woman, as narrator, and we brought in the Earl and Women's Chorus, women's choir to sing with us. And these things are, gosh, they're life-changing. They're life-changing for for Mary and for me. And the education that Mary has described that she's gotten, and that I've gotten, cannot be underestimated, and how important it is. And bringing in people I brought in the World House Choir is a 100-voice choir I just started here 10 years ago. We've been in 6 prisons over the last 10 years and done 15 performances in those various prisons, and getting people inside who are people who have no agenda. They don't want to convert you to something. They don't want to change you. They don't want to criticize you. They don't want to judge you. They come in to sing with you. They interact with you, and they treat you as a person, as a human being. That is what's really important, and that's what changes people. I agree everything with what Mary said about how our society needs to change in all ways, but especially in relation to how we incarcerate and why we incarcerate. And it is it's a contemporary form of slavery. But the importance of music, and arts in general. I just was at a program by a lot of returning citizens. And by the way, last year I had 9 people who sang with me inside, came and sang with my World House Choir outside. And it was amazing for the people in the choir here to be interacting. We did 3 performances together. So you're seeing people nervous, and they're people, right? They have been formerly incarcerated, now they're out, and they're doing so well. But it's arts. California has a budget, an arts budget for every prison. Now that's a beginning. I'm not saying we shouldn't end prisons, because we should, but if you're going to be an artist and you're going to go into prison, to have a budget is really great, because what I do, I'm a volunteer. But I'm getting off the track of the importance of what happens to people. And I think probably Mary has gotten people inside to write and to read those writings is life-changing. And what singing in a choir and singing, it's so unusual, because I have a guy who sang with a professional choir, and he went to the Obama White House twice with this professional choir, and he sang in the World Choir Games, and now he's in for life. I don't know what he did. I never look anybody up. And then I have a young man who sang with the Bowling Green Men's Glee Club. So I am lucky that way. I have, and they're all different. They all like it for totally different reasons. And they're all totally different people who come together in an unusual situation to make music. And the value is for them is really important. And I feel I'm a privileged person all around. And Mary, when you said weaponize your privilege, I want to know the rest of it, but wow.
Weaponize your privilege to save Black lives.
To save Black lives.
And now a quick word from our sponsors.
This season, we are featuring a fierce lineup of women composers found in the Music Spoke marketplace. At Music Spoke, composers receive the majority of the proceeds from sales, retain control over their own works, and all scores are available immediately as digital downloads. At Music Spoke, they do not simply publish pieces of music. They find composers and give them the tools and freedom to promote themselves. You just heard Trilo, a Swedish folk song arranged by Christy Elsner. Check out her works today on musicspoke.com and conductor.com/sponsors.
Hey everyone, Gloria here from Call Time Clothing, back again to remind you to check out our newest special edition items from our collaboration with Conductor. Grab a super soft tee for yourself, a family member, a teacher, or maybe all of the above. We've truly got something for everyone. Head over to Call Time Clothing today.
And we're back.
Yeah. The other element that is really impactful is the way choral singing impacts family relationships. Cathy hasn't even shared the big Hamilton project she did, and the way families got to come in and watch that. At the Oakdale prison, when Jim McKinney was warden, he would allow kids, if an incarcerated singer, an inside singer, had children under 18, he started to allow children to come in, and to see their father involved in something positive like that was really meaningful for them. There have been situations where, like in Kansas, where an incarcerated singer, their family was upset and wouldn't want to visit them in prison because of whatever the person did, but because that choir sings in a public venue, they were very comfortable reuniting with their family in the concert setting. There have been incarcerated individuals in the Oakdale choir that never had a visit in over 6 years, but then the family decided to come and travel however many long, some of them, over 5 hours, to attend a concert and to have that experience. The relationship with family members connecting with each other in the process of coming into the prison attending the event. I mean, there's just so many different levels of impact that it has.
There are so many thoughts I think that come up, and I know this is an episode that our listeners will probably come back to again and again, because I think every time I'm going to come back to it, I'm going to walk away with more, more thoughts and more questions. But it was really interesting, Cathy, how one of the first examples you shared was related to the veterans, and the impact of just like mental health, wellness, isolation, changes in brain chemistry, post-traumatic stress disorder. And although I'm not, I don't live with someone who's been incarcerated, I do live with someone who's been to basic training. And to just see the brain chemistry change, from 0 to 13 weeks, and the traumatic stress that that caused in this person's life. And he would be comfortable sharing this now, but the amount of privilege that we had, and the ability for him to go to therapy, for the ability for him to leave the military after 6 years, because that literal chain was wreaking havoc on my spouse. You know, it was totally different. And that was just 13 weeks. And so now we imagine that everyone's brain chemistry is different. Everyone is impacted in different ways, but it sort of brought up another question for both of you, just thinking about what are some of your biggest takeaways that you've gathered from your work in the United States prison system? And then also, if there was something that you wish people knew about the prison system in America, and maybe how we could make an impact, feel free to share that as well.
Mary, you want to start?
I'm not quite sure which direction to go with that. I mean, currently you're going to get a lot of negative responses just because of where I am and the fact that wardens have unilateral power over what happens in their facility. And any institution where there's one person that has unilateral power is problematic. We have that in our state systems, with governors being the person in charge of commutating life sentences. For example, in the state of Iowa, we have a sentence called life without parole. Not only Iowa, but in Iowa, we've had 0 people. It's been over 10 years since someone's had their life without parole sentence commuted. We had 3 different choir members go up to get their sentences commuted. One of them had 4 yeses from the parole board and 1 no, still denied by the governor. And then there was somebody else who had 5 yeses from the parole board. Yes, this person they should have their life sentence commuted, and the governor still denied that. So your question is, I think, I'm not sure. Would you just restate your question? I'm not quite sure how to answer it. It's a really tough one because
Yeah,
of the
sure.
complexity of the
It
topic.
it is so complex, and I know that there's not one direction that the question could go in. But I think that the thing that Kira and I are wondering about are some takeaways, whether that's for you as an individual or the impact with that within society, from your work in the United States prison system. And if there was something that you wish people knew or could know, or want a hope for them to know about the work that you are doing, and the impact maybe.
Well, I guess one thing is learn as much as you can. If you grew up in a white privileged situation and you don't know about, like, maybe you've never heard of Dakota 38, for example, the largest mass execution that President Lincoln had on December 26th of 1862. And I know there's a lot to the story, but there's so much of history that we don't know as whites. And there's so much that, like this book, Punished for Dreaming, there's so much literature out there. And we need to really learn from people who are impacted by the system. So if anybody is interested in this topic, they need to make connections with people in prison by writing letters, by visiting, find out what are the nonprofit organizations or whatever resources are available for people released from prison, and have conversations with people impacted by the system, and let those individuals lead the way in designing types of programs and lead the way in rethinking what we do. Back in 1976, Faye Honey Knopp wrote a book called Instead of Prisons, an Abolitionist Handbook. So at the very beginning of the rise to mass incarceration, that there were lots of people that said prisons are not going to help anybody. We need to think in a different way. We need decarceration. She used a phrase called excarceration, which would be something other than prisons. like community mediation systems, Daniel Sareed's Common Justice Program out of New York, which is a restorative justice program for people who have committed violent crimes, and it's racially equitable and survivor centered, looking at what are the needs of crime survivors, what are ways we can create healing. And choral singing can absolutely do that, but it also can be problematic. So don't just go, oh, we're going to sing together, it's going to get better. We need to really think carefully about our pedagogy and what are we singing? Is what we're singing related to the lives of the people we're singing with? And to what extent are we doing that? To what extent are we creating affirming spaces? To what extent are we teaching singing as a learned skill? Every concert we used to have, I would do the spiel, singing is a learned skill, and honor where you are in that process, because we always do sing-alongs. In fact, a story I'll share and then I'll pass it over to Cathy is when I first met Jim McKinney in 2015, before he came warden, he said to me, Mary, this is a great project, but I don't sing. Well, every concert I would go through that spiel, singing is a learned skill, honor where you are, la 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 la. Then we got an invitation from the state rep at the time, Mary Masher, to come to the Capitol for a group of outside singers and formerly incarcerated singers. Guess who joined us? Jim McKinney. The warden came with us and sang with us at the Capitol. I have pictures of it. So anyway, it's a big complex question, and I just hope people practice curiosity, not judgmental thinking, and listen to, there are so many really brilliant Black voices out there leading the way. I've mentioned Bettina Love, Prentice Hemphill is no longer doing their podcast, but their podcast Finding Their Way. Miriam Kaba and Miriam's work with the book We Do This Till We Free Us. And there's even been this Inside Outside Songwriting Collaboration Project. A woman named Lindsay Scott did a song with the person that I mentioned earlier, Tony Rod, called Over Under, where she recorded Tony playing guitar, recorded Tony saying what's hard about being in prison, and all of that is in their song together. And it's about over under, this idea of over the fence, under the fence, continuing that motion until we can abolish the harmful practices of prisons. But yet then there are, here's my book, We Do This Till We Free Us. Boom, here it is. Woo! Andre de Quadros's idea in empowering song is really, 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 really good. Music Education from the Margins, that was founded through his work in a Massachusetts prison. So there's lots of different roads. The question is, what is our intention? Are we moving toward a space of that general idea of Ubuntu? Or are we going my way or the highway? And that's a huge contrast. I don't mean it to make that simple, but we have a lot of work to do, and honor the process. Tag Cathy, you're it.
And now a quick word from our sponsors.
Hello, this is Sandra Snow, Director of Choral Programs at Michigan State University and Artistic Director of Mirabai. Mirabai is partnering with the Denver Women's Chorus to present Storytellers, a workshop unlike any conference you've been to. For the first time, leaders in choral music education will partner with members of GALA, the Gay and Lesbian Association of Choruses, to bring a workshop that blends the experiences of musical activists and classroom trailblazers. The Storytellers Conference is designed to improve your rehearsal and ensemble leadership through sessions that promote inclusive pedagogy, cultural responsiveness, and a new lens through which to view the conductor's role. Featured guests will include composer and singer Moira Smiley, and all attendees will be able to see Mirabai in concert. Session presenters will include collegiate educators from across the country and gala chorus leaders who are working as community activists. When we come together to listen to one another's stories, we all grow. Storytellers, listen, connect, expand. To register, see storytellersdenver.org.
Hello, everyone. Jocelyn Hagan here. I just wanted to let you know that the Compose Like a Girl podcast has officially launched. Listen as I interview celebrated composers Sarah Kirkland Snyder, Chen Yi, Dale Trombore, Angelica Negron, Rina Esmail, and more. I'm also hard at work on the next batch of scores in the Compose Like a Girl choral series, distributed by Graphite Publishing. You can help me bring these new pieces to life. I'm always seeking choral ambassadors to perform these new works by emerging composers. If you're interested, please reach out to me, Jocelyn Hagan, via my website, jocelynhagan.com, or social media. I look forward to hearing from you.
And we're back.
Okay. I helped start something called Ohio Prison Arts Connection, OPAC. And at our very first statewide conference, I heard Brian Stevenson, who wrote Just Mercy, speak. And he has 4 things that are really important to him. But the one that stuck out to me the most was proximity. That we as white privileged people, or I'm speaking now, I'm paraphrasing, myself as a white person, where do I circulate? Where do I go? Who do I reach out to? What communities am I in? So whereas Mary was talking about prison and prison abolition, as choral people, we're in communities. Who is in that community? Do they make music in that community? Do they, you have to step out and you have to get proximate. You have to understand poverty. The reasons that people are in prison are they're in untenable situations. They don't have a house. They can't rent an apartment. They are, they're unhoused. They're hungry. They can't pay for rent. They can't pay for, you have to understand all of the systems of systemic racism and all the systems that are connected to that. So I would say we want to get proximate, and we want to understand culture, and we have to do a deep dive into culture, and that there are different cultures. We need to do a deep dive into music education, starting to teach improvisation and listening skills to balance out the imbalance of Western classical music that we teach, but it's not what kids are listening to. There has to be a balance. So what else? Culture. What am I talking about? What are my takeaways? Takeaway is to get proximate. How do you learn about other cultures, other people? You read and everything, and that's really important. And you might sing. You don't want to do one-off singing events with people in your community. You want to get to know the people in your community and do things with them so that you break down some of your stereotypes, some of your thinking that is just your armchair, you're back there and you're judging, you're doing whatever you're doing. So, and culture is such a big thing, understanding culture. And you say, oh, those people, even that, those people, right? Well, you have to understand, in order to understand music, you have to understand where it comes from, the culture that it emanates from, the place, so that's what my takeaway is, there's so much to learn. And I just want to do it one step at a time. And I do want to mix it up, and I want to take risks, and I want to get to know people, and I want to get to know people that are different than me. I want to make music with people that are different than me. And I want to change the world through making music and getting to know people in different communities and getting to know culture and the genesis of all of this music that we hold so dear. I don't know, where do I go from there?
That was excellent.
I don't know. Everything that Mary said, though, is so pertinent. And so, we have to examine the institutions that we've created. We've created prisons. They're ours. It's our culture. The military, it's our culture. Do we want to change? How do we do it? We do it together. As Miriam Kaba says in the introduction, that she says, her father said to her that the most important things were always done with other people. And I would say, hallelujah, music making with other people and social change and activism with other people. Amen.
I know, Kira, Oh, go ahead, Mary.
Well, I was just going to mention the second question was, what do you wish people knew about about the prison system? That we actually have 50 different systems, one for every state, even one for every county. There's so many different stories of prison growth and contrast, changes. But like there's a lot of quote unquote reform that's still not getting at the root, the fundamental shift in consciousness that we are all people and that everyone has done something that could land them in prison. I mean, look at the laws and how laws are changing. It's that there's been targeted criminalization for Black, Indigenous people of color. Let's change this. Let's create a space where we celebrate each person, celebrate the Black American music, which many people do, but in new ways that embrace the love and like that.
I know there's so much that Kira's going to add, but just as we're sharing resources, I don't know if you know about this book called Creating Wicked Students, Designing Courses for a Complex World. Paul Hanstedt is the author of this book. And this is a resource that my good friend Carrie Adams, who teaches at Mizzou, recommended. And I think that when we're talking about just trying to take the privilege that we do have, especially in working with students that are going out into the world to work within systems that are created, that are already complex, that we have a responsibility as educators to promote critical thinking, promote this concept of curiosity. And this book has been a really great guide for me as a new person into higher education, designing courses from this perspective of thinking curiously, asking questions, and wondering about barriers, and how we can move around or go under or move through. So I just wanted to put that into the mix today for anyone who wants to think more critically and deeply as they're designing courses.
That's great. Do they talk about, I'm looking through the table of contents of the book. I'm just wondering if they talk about ungrading. And
there is reference to ungrading, and that's something that I have a couple other resources I can throw in at the end that is something I've been really interested in. It's not a whole chapter, but it is referenced within the text.
Okay, that's good. I started doing contract grading fall of 21, and it's just transformed my work as a teacher in super positive ways. I love it.
I just wanted to return super briefly before I ask you all kind of our last large question, and then we'll go into our final Fast Five, which we ask everyone at the end. But I just was previously living in California, and Cathy, you mentioned how they have this incredible budget system for bringing music to prisons, which is so wonderful. And I was so struck living there by the dichotomy of living in a really liberal place, lived in Los Angeles, and going to, Sunset Boulevard and to West Hollywood, and there's these elaborate, fancy weed stores that you can just walk in, anyone can buy it. And then there are people who are still literally in prison in California because of those charges. And so when we think about global change and we think about reform, we have to ask ourselves these questions of how can this be possible that these two things exist at the same time, and a child can be in prison, someone under 18, for maybe smoking weed one time, and they're there. I mean, it's just we need to think about our own positionality. We need to think about what our positionality would be if we had a different skin color, and we need to ask ourselves the hard questions of how can this be? I mean, I come back to what Mary said earlier about her own personal story, and it is so important to just keep questioning, and it is so important to keep reading and to stay knowledgeable and to ask ourselves what we can do, and voting is a huge part of that. But there's also the human connection, and I think that both of you have describe these experiences of your ensembles having this inner versus outer connection, and this experience of having either family come to see the concert or singing with other people who are not incarcerated actively at that time. And that is so crucial, the bridging of these communities and creating experiences where the different cultures can come together and see and experience things that are different. I just think that's at the root of how we heal. And I think that we may not have the large governmental answers, and we may not be able to make the legislative changes as individuals, but I just want to say that the work that you two have done is the example. And I think that even in our own choral communities, we can start to think, what are our students experiencing at home? And McKenna and I talk about the importance of repertoire and the importance of embodying what their experiences are today and bringing that into our teaching and into how we are approaching things, but also asking ourselves, what is the community that our school lives in? What is the state that our school lives in? How can we be a change maker in terms of bridging these communities and saying, how can we do better? What are we doing well? What's missing? And I just feel like I hope this conversation for our listeners is one that causes a lot of curiosity and a lot of reflection. And I think it certainly will be. And I just want to thank you both for the work that you have done to start that conversation and the actions that you've taken that have made the world better. With that large sweeping statement, we have one kind of closing question for you all before we dive into our Fast Five, which is, you've both been change makers, which is where I was going with that. And we were wondering if you could talk about maybe a piece of advice that you might have for young women who are looking to pursue a new opportunity, who see an area that needs to be changed, and want to start a new project, because you both have done that exact thing. Can you maybe think of a piece of advice that you might have for young women who are interested in getting involved in a leadership project or launching a new ensemble with a change initiative?
One brief thing to start is why. Think about why you're doing what you're doing. How does it relate to your own identity? What is your own positionality? And what are the reasons that you want to do this particular project? Before I started the Oakdale Choir, I spent a lot of time thinking about the purpose of this project is blank, and just did free writing and thinking and thinking and thinking and thinking and thinking and talking to people. Bill Cleveland, he's got a podcast called Change the Story, Change the World. I spoke to him on the phone, and he gave me some advice that if you want to start a project like this, don't think of it as like a summer camp. Think of it as creating a village, really building relationships with the people. So depending on what kind of project different folks listening to this podcast might want to start, reflect on the why, reflect on who might be somebody you can lean into that you trust, that you can get suggestions and advice from. Have a team of people to share your ideas. We've talked a lot about this idea of collaborative leadership and how we learn more when we are collaborating with others. Like you two on this podcast is a really great model. Together, you two make decisions on what direction you want to go with Conduct Her. So it's like everything is magnified with the quality of the work that's being done. So those are a few things off the top of my head. What about you, Cathy?
Mary, you're amazing. Oh my gosh. Okay. Something that needs to be addressed or advice. Let's see. We in the choral field, in the Western classical tradition primarily, have a hard time with hip hop. And hip hop is the dominant musical form in the world. It's not just the United States, but we've sent it around the world, and it's a very big thing. So how do we, if we want to think of it as a project, can we combine those worlds? Can those worlds move into each other's spaces? And so if it's for women, boy, do we need some strong women writing about women hip hop artists and women composers. I mean, what could be done if we're thinking about a project, a challenging project? It is possible. It is possible. But we have to think about how we bring worlds together, right? And I think that these are two worlds that shouldn't be, separate. Is there a way? And I'm not saying there is, but I believe there is, because I've been working on it, trying to make it happen. That's a project, and that would be some advice, and that would be stepping into some territory where you're mixing it up with people who are different than you are, and you're finding out about that. Advice is that there are lots of women, unsung women, who need to be written about. If you're a doctoral student and you need a dissertation topic, if you're a new young woman and in a position at a college, conservatory or university, and you need a book topic because you need to get published or you'll perish. There's lots that needs to be investigated. So that's kind of the more academic and scholarly aspect. There's lots of work to do there. But if you want to mix it up, I think, and do things, I think that the idea of combining hip hop and classical and what are the intersections and are there intersections? And I mean, think of the kids you teach. Aren't you music educators? And I mean, we're lopsided. And not that that's bad altogether. It is bad to be lopsided, no matter what. We want to be balanced. And so, you know, I don't know. I think it would be fabulous for women to step forth like Amanda Weber, and Mary made reference to her. She's doing incredible things in northern Minnesota with the women's choir. I can't tell you how many fabulous things I did and wanted to do in 4 years at with the women's choir inside Dayton, when I had, as also Mary said, a warden who was 100% behind everything I could. Doors open. The person who's there now, doors closed. Where we did Hamilton, where we had 700 people from the outside come in to witness this amazing 95-minute reduction of the Hamilton project. Doors opened. I could ask, can we bring in costumes? Can we do this? Whatever, right? Now it's one of the worst prisons, change of administration. None of us want to go there. None of us can go there. So boy, the women's prisons especially need women. They need women models. They need women who are willing to come in there and be vulnerable. And so yeah, there's a never-ending list of things to be done. And I think that just learning about racism and doing some anti-racism work and mixing it up with people, because that then is an impetus to step outside your comfort zone and widen your world, widen your circle. I don't know if I answered the question, but
Yeah, it's beautiful.
I'm just glad to be here with Mary, because Mary is an inspiration to me. I just read something she wrote that I don't know, Mary, I thought that was, I could start to cry. Why don't you just say just a minute about that, because it was
Sure. Yeah, what happened last spring, I was taking a spiritual writing class from Andy Douglas. Andy Douglas used to sing in the Oakdale Choir back when we were alive. And he wrote a book called Redemption Songs, A Year in the Life of Community Prison Choir. He's a nonfiction writer and a spiritual guru. So the spiritual writing class, Thursday, March 30th, it's on Zoom. The topic was grief. We're writing about grief. So I thought, okay, I'd written a lot about my sister Judy, who died unexpectedly back in 2012. I could write about the grief I'm experiencing with the choir. So I started the essay that Thursday. The next day, Friday the 31st, was the day I received the email from the current warden, Mike Heinrichsey, saying, we've been reviewing our programming to see what is, he used all sorts of phrases like what we had the space for, what they had the space for, what was sustainable, what fit their programming mission, and they determined the choir was not one of those things. I mean, can anybody listening to this that's led a choir, even for a semester, 11 years into the 12th year, a community of, people I really, really cared about. And I had this hope that I knew he didn't really want the choir to start, but I thought maybe at least he'd do a songwriting workshop. I wrote him an email back in January saying, what about a songwriting workshop? He never responded to that email. So then I dug into that essay that spring, and I called it Squelched in a Bottleneck, that feeling of just not being able to do what you wanted to do, and the anger I felt in my heart. I have a meditation practice. I practice transcendental meditation twice daily, and the practice instruction is, if there's something physically we're noticing in our body or emotionally, to not push through it, just like you would just gently caress a baby or gently caress someone. Do that for yourself. And it took several days. It was like this, if you could imagine a burner, electric burner with one burner right in the middle, and that one's on fire. That was my heart, of the anger I was feeling in my heart. And it took several days to experience that till finally it settled, and lots of time reflecting on, what does this mean? What does this mean and what's possible? So anyway, I wrote an essay I shared. It's not published anywhere yet because I'm not quite sure where to publish it, but that's what Cathy was referring to, the process of navigating grief.
There's I hope that one day that can be something we can share with our community, because I know there are so many people who are navigating the waters of grief, and especially in our research related to the sustaining of women in academia. A lot of women reference sort of just what you were talking about, that single burner of rage, or the microaggressions, or the continued lack of appreciation for skills, or being put into a box of, well, you're the organized one, so here's a spreadsheet for you, but the artistic side will still be run by the men, or whatever it might be. So it's that sort of meditative practice that you were talking about, I know would be a benefit for all of us, I think, but especially working through the trauma that comes as a part of disappointment and crossroads in life. So thanks so much for sharing. Mary, both of you have been so vulnerable. I'm like holding back. I've been holding back tears for half the episode. So I'm proud of myself for making it.
And now a quick word from our sponsors.
Pavon Publishing is proud to feature outstanding women composers and conductors.
Composer Judith Harrington has created a prolific choral series for youth and treble choirs that includes Fireflies from Japan and Duérmete mi corazón from Brazil.
Shirley McRae has many outstanding arrangements for young choirs, including popular songs like Black Sheep, and Sakura.
Conductor Iris Levine maintains a treble chorus series of medium to advanced works with text by poets from Teasdale to Yeats.
Other composers and authors in the Pavon family circle include Zenaida Stewart-Robles, Catherine Rundis, and Martha Wall. Explore all of these fantastic composers at Pavon Publishing. And we're back. But what we'd like to close with is just to take things in a different direction and get to know a little bit more about you two as artists, teacher, musicians, change makers in the field. And so these are our fast five. And so what I'd like to do is ask the question and then sort of just alternate back and forth for those answers. And so the first one that we'd like to lead with is, what is a current, whether it be an octavo, a song taught in the oral tradition, or a composer or group recommendation that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Pam Blevins Hinkle, let us show up and light up the dark. Let us show up, bring joy to each heart. Let us show up with indifference destroyed. Let us show up with joy.
Well, that was exceptional. Now that is what, and that's the power of music. Cathy, any additions?
All right. Well, so I can only say that I'm incredibly excited and petrified also to be starting to teach a piece called Weather. And I would ask your audience to look at the poem called Weather, Weather, and it's by an African-American woman at Yale, Claudia Rankine, an author and poet, and set to music by Rollo Dilworth at Temple University, a music educator, I'm sure you all know, and he said he would come to the performance. I heard it in February, and the World House Choir is going to undertake this piece, and we're going to undertake doing some anti-racism workshops, because we cannot enter into this as a primarily white choir. I'd say we might have 20% people of color. we're going to do some anti-racism work, and then we're going to delve into this 20-minute work or so called Weather. I'm completely excited. It's going to challenge me in all kinds of ways. But yeah, that's the thing that's on my front burner and excites me and petrifies me also. Is that
That's a
what
sign
you
of
were looking
something
for?
good is coming for. That's excellent, Cathy. I was saying that's the sign that something good is going to come when it scares you and you also are excited by it. So that is excellent. All right, our second question in our Fast Five is, what is one misconception about you?
That I don't get nervous.
Excellent. Mary, do you have one?
I don't know how to answer that because I don't know what other people think of me. Maybe that they don't realize how much I love to dance because I don't have much of an opportunity in my life right now to dance. I love to dance.
I love it. You can sort of tell from the way that you use your hands, actually. You're a movement person, and I love it. And creative motion, so many connections of movement to dance and music. Third question in the Fast Five: what is one word to describe you as a conductor, teacher, leader? One word to synthesize you. So hard.
Activist.
Kira and I are clapping on the screen.
Bridge builder with a hyphen between the two. So it's one word, right? Bridge builder.
Incredible. You can tell that Mary is a true academic. You're so intellectual. Like this whole episode, I love it. Mary's literally had a bookshelf next to her and she's like, well, this book and this book and this book and this book. And yes, I love it. Also, the combination of two words into one, brilliant. All right. The fourth question. This is very silly. So just know that going in. The question is, what is a choral blooper that maybe you have experienced in your time teaching?
A choral blooper, meaning not knowing how to end a piece, or not doing it, not conducting it perfectly so that the people know how to end the piece. That just happened. Thank goodness it was in an open dress rehearsal and not a concert. I put up my fist, to go back to a certain spot, and they did not go back to that spot. And so we had some people ending the piece earlier than other people ending the piece. Is that a blooper? I would say.
That's excellent. Thank you, Cathy. Mary, does one come to mind for you?
Well, probably 50,000 come to mind. I don't know which one to pick. But the first thing that came to mind was one time when the choir was a teeny bit smaller in the Oakdale prison and we were in what was called the testing room. I remember rehearsing and seeing a currently incarcerated choir member who had been transferred to another prison. We didn't know where he was, show up at the door. And I was so surprised that I was actually walking through the choir, kind of listening to people. And I think I must have I had a cup of water in my hand, and I saw him and I was like, I was gonna jump over to the door, and I tripped and fell, and the water fell off the floor. It caught everybody by surprise, but I'll never forget one of the men in the choir very, very graciously got another cup of water and handed it to me, and that just gentle giving me a cup of water was really beautiful. But I'd never fallen literally on my face in a choir rehearsal before, so I would say that would be a blooper.
That's a beautiful blooper, also bookended by a lovely moment of gratitude and kindness. I think both of you sort of had that within that. It's like, it's the open dress rehearsal, so there was another chance. So it's always nice to have a blooper tied to something beautiful. Our final question in the Fast Five would be, what is a favorite choral or singing memory that you'd like to share?
I guess for me, I'm thinking of there's a plethora. There's so many, but thinking about Inside, the Hamilton project was a project that I'll never forget, and some of the main characters are out and are doing extremely well and perform with the World House Choir. But that project was such a stretch for me, right? I mean, it's all about hip hop. And yeah, I just, it was out of my category and it became my category. And it, you know, that in that regard, with relation to the prison, there are a bunch of things, but that's sort of a standout one right there. With my women's choirs, there's a ton, really, so many things that are beautiful. So I think that right now, I would say the Hamilton Project.
Mary?
Mine is in November of 2018, we were able to bring in the Soweto Gospel Choir into the Oakdale prison. This was what we called a musical learning exchange. And basically, the previous May, I get a phone call or an email from the director of Hancher at the time, Chuck Swanson, saying, "Hey, the Soweto Gospel Choir is coming in November. Would it be possible that they could do something in the prison?" So I contacted the warden at the time. Jim McKinney was like, "Absolutely, this is making my day. We're going to have them come." So I found a song just searching online that in some of the community singing choir websites called "How Shall We Come Together? We Shall Come Together Singing" by Maggie Wheeler. Maggie Wheeler leads a choir in Los Angeles called the Golden Bridge Choir. She's an actress and was in the show Friends. She played the role of Janice, the character that would go, "Oh my God." She's also a remarkable songwriter. She went through the community choir leadership training program that I got to do. She went very early on, and has been leading these amazing groups. So when she found out I wanted to use her song, I called her to get permission to use her song, that I wanted to use her song in a prison with a Soweto Gospel Choir. She's like, "Okay, I'm coming to Iowa." So she facilitated songs, and her friend Sarah Thompson, who's based in outside of Duluth, Minnesota, who also went through the community choir leadership training, which was one of my inspirations. Like, wow, if Maggie and Sarah went to this training, I've got to go to this training. So anyway, they came, and what happened was everybody facilitated songs. We took away the word audience and performer. We had just everybody were performers. I facilitated a conversation based on this book, Reframing Community Partnerships in Education, Uniting the Power of Place and Wisdom of People, called a community learning exchange, where you gather people together and have facilitated conversation on whatever issues are important to the people. So we pulled this idea into a musical learning exchange, and a couple colleagues of mine and I did a research project on it and published about it. So it was just amazing to have the Soweto Gospel Choir lead songs. It was like an intercultural musical exchange, and then the theme of the event was "Changes We Choose." So that was the topic of the conversation that I facilitated among participants. And that was, I remember the look on everybody's face when I said, "Okay, now we're something completely different. You're going to turn and talk to the person you're sitting next to, and have that be part of the whole engaged process." So it's a model that I think many other people can use. And it's a great idea to combine singing with actually the proximity that Cathy talked about earlier, making connections with the people and facilitating conversation, all based on a purpose.
Wow. Oh, that's so beautiful, Mary. I think that both of the stories that you just shared are going to be inspirational for those who are listening to this podcast in terms of coming up with their own new ideas and ways to be creative with their community in terms of not only how they're teaching, but how we are performing. And I love that there was this through line of singing in the oral tradition today, and a through line of singing in community and what that can mean. And it can have a variety of meanings. So yeah, there is so much to take away from today, and I feel greatly inspired by both of you, and so honored to have had this conversation with you. And we thank you both so much for being here.
Thank you for that.
And McKenna and Kara, thank you for your leadership on this podcast.
Yeah,
it's really
absolutely.
beautiful that you are elevating women's voices and really getting some critical conversations about these important topics.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Again, just so grateful. And every day we get the privilege to interview people on the podcast. I think here and I walk away thinking, wow, there's so much we don't know, and there's so much more to learn. And I think the day that we stop doing that is a disservice to everyone. And I hope that everybody feels that way after they get the chance to listen, especially today. And if you don't know our work, we are Conductor, and you can check us out on social media, on Instagram and Facebook, and also our website, www.conducther.com. So we hope that you check us out, give us a follow, and stay tuned for more amazing content. So thank you. Thank you for listening. This has been Conductor.
This episode was engineered and mixed by Mary Hannah Klontz, with intro and outro music by Jonathan Martin and ad music by Kate Krellin.
Discover more resources at conducther.com.